You know that feeling when you create something, a piece of code, a photo, maybe a bit of music, and you just want to give it to the world. Like, completely, no strings attached, for anyone to use forever. It sounds so simple, right? But it turns out actually doing that is a fascinating legal maze. So, okay, let's dive in. So that's the big question, isn't it? For any of us who've ever wanted to share something without restriction, how do you make that generous impulse into something that's legally solid and that everyone everywhere can understand? Well, today we're going to unpack the exact tools designed to do just that. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at how you can even spot works that are already free for the taking. Then we'll get into the real puzzle, why giving your new work away is so darn tricky. After that, we'll check out the ingenious legal tools that came up as a solution, take a little tour of the most common ones, and finally get into why this is still a pretty hot debate. All right, first things first. Before we can even think about adding our own stuff to the public domain, we need a way to see what's already there. You know, like a universal signpost for all the amazing creative works that already belong to every single one of us. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. We've all seen the little C symbol on the left, right? That's basically a keep out sign. It's a claim of ownership. But the symbol on the right, that's the public domain mark. It's not a claim at all. It's a label. It's more like a welcome in sign. It says, hey, this thing, it's already free of any known copyright. Have at it. And this is the absolute key thing to understand about the public domain mark, or PDM. It's like a historical marker. You'd slap this on a Shakespeare play or a Beethoven symphony to let people know its copyright has expired. But, and this is crucial, you can't use it to release your own new work. For that, you need something else entirely. And that brings us right to the heart of the puzzle. So, you've just taken a stunning photo or written some amazing code. You want to give it away. You just say this is public domain and you're done, right? Well, not so fast. It's a lot more complicated than it seems. This is the real mind bender. It sounds totally backwards, but in a lot of legal systems around the world, you literally can't just abandon your copyright. The law automatically grants you these rights the second you create something, and some of those rights are designed to be, well, pretty sticky. So why is it so complicated? Well, for one, copyright law is different all over the world. What's okay in the US might totally fall apart in France. And second, there's this concept called moral rights. It's this idea, especially big in Europe, that you have a right to be known as the creator of your work. And that's a right you just can't give away. So a simple, it's public domain statement might not hold up in court, which leaves everyone feeling uncertain. So, if a simple declaration isn't enough, what do you do? Well, creators needed a really solid, legally sound way to get the effect of putting their work in the public domain. And this is where a really clever legal workaround comes into play. A whole toolkit of special licenses. They're called public domain equivalent licenses. And honestly, they're kind of genius. Instead of trying to abandon a right that the law says you can't get rid of, you use a license to give every single person on Earth an irreversible, unconditional permission slip to do whatever they want with your work. It's the next best thing to a true public domain dedication. And here's the magic of how it works. First, the creator picks a license and applies it to their work. That license then does two incredible things at once. First, it makes a bold statement. I waive all my rights to this work. But, and this is the brilliant part, it has a backup plan. It also says, and hey, if any court anywhere in the world decides I can't legally do that, then just consider this a license that gives you absolute freedom to do whatever you want anyway. It's a legal safety net. Okay, so what's actually in this toolkit? It's not just one tool. You've got a few popular options, and they each take a slightly different path to get to that same goal of ultimate freedom for the user. Let's look at the big three. You've got CC0 from Creative Commons, which is probably the most famous one, with that strong waiver plus fallback system. Then there's the unlicensed, which is super similar but just worded a bit more simply. And then you have something like OBSD, which kind of skips the whole waiver thing and just gives a super short unconditional permission slip. Now, pay close attention to that column on the right, because whether these are approved for open source software, well, that's a whole can of worms we're about to get into. And just to give you some perspective, this data from GitHub back in 2015 shows that licenses like the unlicensed are, a pretty small slice of the pie. They're definitely not as common as giants like MIT or GPL. But that 2%, that still represents hundreds of thousands of projects from people who wanted to offer the most freedom possible. So, great, we've got the tools, problem solved, everybody's happy, right? Well, This is where the story gets even more interesting, because the debate around these tools, especially in the software world, is very, very much alive and kicking. I mean, just look at this timeline. It's wild how much the thinking has shifted. In 2004, you have a top lawyer arguing you can't even do this. By 2011, major groups are recommending it as the best way. Then in 2012, that same lawyer publicly changes his mind. And yet, just a couple of years ago, a huge software project like Fedora put new restrictions on using CC0 for code. It just shows you this is still a moving target.
And this quote from Lawrence Rosen is just perfect. It captures that shift so well. He's basically saying that the sheer number of creators using these tools to share their work became this unstoppable force of nature, a fire hose, that the legal world just had to acknowledge and adapt to. It's a really powerful statement about the will of a community.
So, what are people still arguing about today? Well, the biggest one is patents. Licenses like CC0 don't have a clear clause about patents, and that makes a lot of people in the open source world really nervous. And that worry has real consequences. You get big companies like Google putting up policies that restrict their own employees from contributing to projects that use these licenses. So yeah, it's a messy intersection of copyright, patents, and corporate rules.
So here's the thing. Our desire to share freely online just seems to move faster than the laws that are meant to govern it. The tools we talked about today are a brilliant answer to that problem. But it leaves us with one last big question. In a world where a creator in one country and a user in another are just a click apart, what does the next generation of these tools need to look like to finally, simply, let us give our work to the world?